So you can.
So is this just going to be a kind of a summary of what's happened?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. We'll give you an idea. This you can't actually use as such. Now I've got this all sorted out. Right. If I remember rightly, you had the appearance of William McLeod last week. Not to halfway through the game. Right. Okay. A lot of what happened to William McLeod you won't know, because that's happened in the background. He only appeared halfway through the evening, if I remember rightly. I think at the start you had rival. Yes, you had a start of the evening in question. I believe it would have been Sunday the 5th of August. You wake up to discover that you have two new guests. One of them was William McLeod, and a Tibero Pudanesca Gravado. Someone who looked like a gangster. Mr. Pudanesca Gravado was only a temporary visitor. He was just talking business with the Marchese, and he would disappear. William McLeod, I think, is just one of the people who came in. You also were going to have a little field trip to the airport, which you were going to meet some further people coming in from out of town. You sat in the room. You did the usual thing. If I remember rightly, the Marchese in the middle. I think your character's on one side, Becky, and I think Mr. Mayor was the other side. The servants sort of brought him in. They were little, how you say, put out by something. They brought in, I think it was Serafina Zara, which Mr. Mayor has met before in Berlin. She's the one with the horns. That sounds good, doesn't it? The one with the extensive, what would be called fleshcraft. But that's not national. And they said, and Major Benedict Smythe, who pointed out he'd actually staked what the other person was supposed to be there, on the pretense that the character in question had been, one of his clients had been searching for him. He apologised for the inconvenience, if I remember rightly. And you wandered off back to the haven. I don't think it'll look. Have I gone a day ahead again? Keep doing this. Yes, you had another talk where he said basically what your various tasks were. And I remember rightly, Mr. Mayor, you're there for the banking, and so he can get business in there. Renata's there because basically you're his sire. If I remember rightly, Sarafina was there because she's Tremere and he may need her talents there. Mr. Smythe is because he has certain other talents. But he tends to now keep out of the way. Again, he doesn't tell you, the Marquis doesn't tell you a lot what he will actually do while you're there. Just subtle hints that it's to do with the planning he's doing, but he's not going to tell you because it's safer that you don't know. And I think you went into the garden after that and had a discussion, didn't you?
Yes,
I believe
we did.
You did?
Yes, and then at some point in the night I retired.
Yeah. It was during that discussion with Mr. McLeod and yourselves that you, I think, thought that someone was using obfuscate to actually eavesdrop the conversation. If I remember rightly, Renata doesn't like Mary Quatermain because she's doting on the Marchese or Marcello, rather was it too much? I remember that was a lot of at the start. She was watching out the window as you went out for the meeting, and that was the first evening. on the second evening. Oh, that's the one. Oh yes, you were summoned tonight on the next night, which was was it Sunday? Did I say Thursday? Oh, I get the days mixed up. Then the next night you are basically summoned by the master, who basically says we're going on a little field trip to see a certain was it Malkavian in the Garden City who was into, was it predictions, etc. I think he had a nice talk to you and gave you some bits and pieces. I think, yeah, gave you some bits and pieces about your future. You made a note of that, did you? What he said?
Me, yeah. He said that future plans will bear fruit. It will be a double-edged sword.
Yeah, that's the gist of it.
One will ascend by casting back the other two from whence they came.
And there's also the one he also said you will have a choice to make. Someone ends up either a slave or a prisoner of circumstances.
Yeah, that's the last one, yeah.
That's alright. That was a Malkavian who claimed to have the was it ear of God. As you were going back, you noticed the two men in black, was it watching you? If I remember rightly.
Yeah, and they were identical, not just similar.
Yes, and a certain, was it Putanesca Ravanano had disappeared from the house at that point. Unfortunately, I think William MacLeod has a lot more information about what was going on with that gentleman. And then I think on the evening after you had, I remember, this is the more dramatic evening. You had the pep talk at the start because you were being let out to play in Cairo.
Yes, it's not a good idea.
Yeah. And then this is where I went into my room.
Yes, I'll tell you how it works on this. You had a little pep talk, you're free to wander around Cairo. You had an unexpected visitor at that point who appeared from nowhere, if I remember rightly, sitting on a seat in the library using a very good case of obfuscate. A certain Matthias Hyundai, who pointed out that your mother, who's been ill, was possessed by a soul eater, and he'd been sent by the was it Talmere Ra to kill her.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you hadn't stopped her and hadn't said anything, he would have actually killed her there and then. I think you actually spoke up, which was a good thing. I was expecting, where are you going to, where are you not going to? He has now given you a month to find a cure for her. After that month he will come for her and he will kill her. And then he disappeared out of the room using obfuscate yet again. By the way, not everybody uses obfuscate. So actually,
no, you do when they want to freak you out.
Yes. You also, Mr. Mayor had a nice little discussion with Dominic DeLuca, who gave you a nice little room with links to the bank. The only thing you weren't happy about was it Mary Quartermain, who you now know has some very remarkable talents with computers, had set the computers up, which sort of worried you slightly, if I remember rightly.
Yes, and that's why I spent the night setting up encryptions and other such things.
Yes. Or as best as you could get in 2001.
Which is still actually fairly good.
Yes, most of the technology is still in use. In the meanwhile, I think both, Becky's character Mr. MacLeod wandered around Cairo, generally taking in the atmosphere, and the sort of things you had. Now I'm going to figure out which ones you had, which ones you did. Right,
Hang on.
No, you didn't do that one. You met the Riddling Prince, as in another Malkavian, who sat in a cafe and generally talked at you for a while, mostly nonsense. Came with things.
What was his name? Sorry.
Aziz.
Aziz.
Yes. He smiled a lot, talked a lot of nonsense, said things like evil moves deep within the city. The prince is clanless. Banu Zamalek is the home of the caitiff, which is the prince's island. The prince's island is Rhoda, on the Nile. He said the burial sites, or I forget what the burial sites were dangerous to go in.
Yeah.
He said the Sabbat are active in Cairo and their bishop resides in Banal de Lama. And always be wary of werewolves in Cairo. Tensions are near breaking point, if I remember rightly. That was one of the few various things he told you between that.
Okay.
After which you wandered off, and yes, you and Mr. McLeod, Becky, had an interesting meeting with a little girl who basically said you were not meant to be there because her sire told you weren't meant to be there. She got to the point of, was it almost asking you, threatening you, when a gentleman with a skull face appeared from nowhere and called her Angelique and told her that her sire wants them there and do not jeopardize the plans and go away. At which point she sits there, looks very, very, perplexed by the whole situation. The guy with the skull face was the guy you saw as you were coming out of the scene, the prince, the one that nodded at Marcello, at the Marchese.
Yeah.
She looked very angry, and before she left, she said, "This is not finished." I think that was one of the last things you did. I didn't see that. Didn't do that. You also had a meeting with a guy who said arms for the poor, who tried to ask money and then had a very odd effect. He said, "Oh, I don't take money from leeches like you," spat on the floor and walked off. And I think I left you after the meeting with the because that happened before. I left you at the meeting. You were on your way home, sort of wondering what to do next.
Yeah.
Because you just had this meeting with this little girl who said you weren't meant to be there, and her master was not meant to be there. Right, there is going to be a little bits and pieces here. For the next bit, there will be Roddy. I'll have to. Some of the stuff I'll do in front of the rest of the characters. There's one bit we'll have to do on the on a separate channel. On a separate channel, and we'll do that bit in the that bit on the separate channel. Will just drag you down. There is an issue with the Discord. If I drag you down to the channel, you have to again drag yourself back to the other channel, disconnect and reconnect if you can't hear anybody. It's a little glitch with the Discord.
Okay.
And there's also going to be a point where Mr. Mayor will have to be separated. Yeah, you actually have something to do today, which is a secret.
Ooh, yay!
But what I'm not going to do, there'll be two meetings happening at the same time. Your meeting will be sort of separate, but you can listen in onto the other meeting because one, you'd be sitting there by yourself talking to nobody. But during that meeting, you'll have to keep quiet and just be an innocent bystander. After which, they'll probably pass and fill you in what actually happened. Right, so it's going to be a bit bitty at the start, but it's once you're all here, it will all go, slot together. Right, so now I've got to find where I've done this. First thing, buddy, you get a letter through the post or whatever they use. I'll now pass this down to you if I can find it and where I put it. Handouts.
Oh, have you turned off the recording for Tom?
You have. Thanks for